facial expression to mean hunger. When we see successive shots of a child in a coffin or a beautiful woman, we interpret the actor's expression as grief and desire, respectively. It seems that when the film was first shown, the audience raved about the acting of this actor, how he was able to emote so appropriately in each instance. The heavy pensiveness of his mood over the soup, they were touched and moved by the deep sorrow with which he looked on the dead child and noted the lust with which he observed the woman. But today we know that in all three cases, the face is exactly the same. The same shot is repeated over and over again, but our interpretation of what that expression means in each instance comes only because of what follows, the shot B that follows in each instance. Now I'll show you my last clip, which is Shri Krishna Janma. This is a film from 1918 made by Dada Saheb Phalke. I'll just stop the share and we'll go to the video. Again, this is a silent film, so don't worry about sound. This is a slightly longer clip. Please notice, everything about this clip. We discussed all aspects. Sorry, sorry.
ಕಾಲೇಜ್ನಿಂದ ಮುಗ್ದೇ ಇರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ ಇನ್ನು ಮೇಡಮ್ ಬೇರೆ.
Yeah, I'll stop this clip at this point and go back to my PowerPoint. So this is Falke's film of 1918. You would have noticed that in the beginning, in the lower frontal edge of the screen, you would have found a whole set of supplicating hands of the people. There is a centered image of Vishnu that appears from the ocean in response to the people's pleas. And of course, there's a kind of frontal view of Vishnu for the spectators as well. So Vishnu appears right, in the middle of the screen as he rises from the ocean. And right in front at the edge of the screen are people. Probably those people are also, with whom we identify with as spectators outside of the frame and outside of the screen. Then Vishnu focalizes to us a futuristic view of him coming as Krishna, as people watch Krishna in a future yuga. So you have him assuring people that he will come in the form of Krishna later on. So you actually have Krishna appearing on the screen in a kind of flash forward. Having shown the future, we go back to Vishnu assuring the people that he will, heed to their pleas and come to solve their problems. This is followed by the present, what ostensibly can be considered as the present, when Krishna's mother, so this is the time of the film, that is Krishna has taken birth. So you can see Krishna's mother rocking the cradle, but even as she's rocking the cradle, you see that she's focalizing a future. Focalizing here simply means that we see what the character sees. So she focalizes a future Krishna with Kamadhenu playing the flute. In the meanwhile, we have a spatial shift in the film. As in Kamsa's palace, we see Kamsa's focalizations of his impending death, again in future. So first we see his head, he feels himself beheaded. Then we also see his focalization of Krishna through his hallucinations and dreams. So far then, what I have been doing with these three examples of the silent films is to look at causal relations, the way in which through editing causal relations are established, the way in which spatiality and temporal shifts are marked through editing. In this particular film, you will notice that we move across three spaces. That is Vaikunta, Vishnu's Vaikunta, then Krishna's home with his mother rocking the cradle, and Kamsa's palace. So editing has taken us across these three different spaces. The Vaikunta sequence you would consider as the backstory for Krishna's birth, if we consider that as the present. There are intimations of future in all three spaces. That is what you would call as flash forwards. Just as you have flashbacks, which take us to a backstory, here we have flash forwards, which take us to what is portended, what may happen in future. In these sketchy tableau sequences, it's not like everything is spelled out to us in these sequences. You will also remember that this is early cinema. It's all very new. We have these films of pioneering a filmmaker like Dadasaheb Phalke. So it's not like everything in a particular scene is sketched out. So it's more like a tableau sequence. And so much of this sequence depends upon the foreknowledge of the viewer, particularly with respect to how you fill in on the narrative details. Thus, in our discussion so far, where we have not yet factored in sound, so I began by discussing film, one-shot film with very incipient, editing techniques that are incorporated. We see three important functions of editing: manipulation of time, evocation of space, and causal relations that take shape. So we are able to distinguish one space from the other We notice temporal development. We also, are able to see some kind of cause and effect relationship all coming through editing over here. Now I move to somewhat contemporary films and examples probably that are somewhat more familiar to all of us. Many of these examples I have taken from Kannada and Hindi films. Maybe you're familiar with some of them. Now, here I will be introducing, two terms. One, the visual narrator, the function of the visual narrator, and two, later on we will talk about the auditory narrator, the function of the auditory narrator as well. If we look at a film like Lucia, the visual narrator has taken on the guise of one of the characters. Here, I hope that some of you would have watched this film. If you haven't watched it, please go back and watch it. It's a very, very interesting film. A film that particularly works very well in class. So students love the film. It's one of the films that is on one of the courses that I teach. So in Lucia, the visual narrator has taken on the guise of one of the characters. Shots which we may think of as external focalization. So external focalization, shots that come to us through an external narrator. So initially we think that there are two stories that are running in parallel. One, the story of Nikhil, who is lying on a hospital bed, who is a very famous film star. And then Nikki, who is, what he calls himself as a battery operator or torch shiner in a single screen theater. So we think initially that these two are externally focalized stories coming to us from an external narrator. But shots which we thought of as external focalization, we realize they are subjective shots. This makes the film narratologically split. On the one hand, Nikki, the battery operator in a single screen theater, is the one we continually see on screen. His struggles to get his love, his difficulties with that, all the issues that are happening in the single screen theater, his inability to sleep, and so on. On the other hand, we are watching the entire film through the eyes of Nikhil, who is lying in coma on a hospital bed. Initially, we see the character and his alter ego on the same level. That is, the external narrator, as I said, is telling us two parallel stories. That's what we think. But slowly we realize that in a drug-induced sequential dreaming, Nikhil has dreamed up Nikki's story, and in the end, the dream life seems to take over Nikhil's life. If you have noticed films, such techniques are also used by Hollywood films like Fight Club or Inception. So this is a very, very interesting technique where, the narrator and focalizing, the narration and focalizing function gets split. What we thought was externally focalized suddenly becomes internally focalized. I won't be showing you clips from this film. I know it would have been interesting, but I thought it would be better to manage time without showing clips from this film. Also, I thought you would be more familiar with some of these films. These examples are, maybe somewhat more familiar. So having discussed this film, you can also go back to watch them, I suppose. Now I move on to the second kind introduce a second complication, which is there in present day cinema, which has to do with sound. So far, it seemed like we are only talking about the visuals. We seem to be, taking into account only visuals when we talk about, narration in cinema. Now we look at what happens with the introduction of an auditive narrator and focalizer. Now, audio somehow we seem to think of as always secondary. We think we are more likely to think of film as a visual medium, and we always seem to talk about image of this person, image of blacks, image of women in cinema without really accounting for enough of the second dimension of cinema, which is sound. Usually, the story of film is determined by what you can call as a kind of audio-visual contract. Cuts are determined by sound. So that is, the camera follows whoever speaks or whatever noise is heard. So the camera generally follows to reveal the source for us. By sound here, I include voiceover. This could be of a voiceover narrator or the voiceover of a character narrator, dialogues that take place on screen, which often the camera follows, music and noise, general noise. This could be in the form of footsteps, traffic noise, doors opening and closing. All that Foley artists create for us, and evoke for us when we watch a film on screen. It is the auditive narrator. So, like unlike in literature where it's possible for us to think of a kind of unitary narrator who narrates via language, here, following Verstraeten, I use these two terms, visual narrator and auditive narrator, because they seem to have, sometimes they seem to coalesce, their functions seem to come together, but more often than not, they seem to have very diverse kinds of functions, and as a result of which film narration becomes very, very complex. We may think, oh, we are seeing something, but what our ears are hearing is somewhat different from what we are seeing. So there's a kind of disharmony, disjuncture between what we see and what we hear, which creates a particular layer of complexity in cinema. So auditive narrator determines whether we hear what the character on screen hears or not. As we're watching the film, often we demand that we overhear what a character speaks. The film auditive narrator may choose to kind of accede to our demand and say, okay, let me show you what the characters are speaking or what the characters are hearing. But there are also times when, for various purposes, for suspense or for whatever other reason, the auditive narrator is not ready to show us what the characters on the screen are speaking. So auditive narrator determines whether we hear what the character on screen hears or not. There are times when we see characters listening or conversing on the screen, but the auditive narrator does not bother to give us what they hear or speak, frustrating our desire to overhear the characters. So as I was saying, you will notice in many films there's a kind of tension between the visual and auditive narrators, or there is a dominance of one over the other. I'm again giving very recent examples, partly because I have watched them in the last 2-3 months, partly because I'm also assuming that some of you may be familiar with these films. There's this film called Kannad Gottilla, which is, a Kannada film. And in that, there is this investigator, this police investigator called Shruti Chakravarti, who unravels the crime by hearing something on her laptop. So they're trying to investigate a series of murders of people that is happening in Bangalore. What is common to all these people who are getting killed is they are outsiders from, who don't belong to Karnataka and who say Kannad Gottilla. So they don't know Kannada, so and they're all getting killed. So Shruti Chakravarti's task in the film is to unravel this mystery. We are watching her, through this process. At one point, she connects her phone to the laptop. She overhears something, and immediately we think, we too should know, because we are on the brink of unraveling the mystery of the film. But instead of hearing what the character hears, what we have is extra diegetic music, which kind of reaches a crescendo, in the background, almost completely drowning out for us what Shruti Chakravarti, the investigator, hears. So it's only later, a few minutes later in the course of the interrogation of the suspected killer, that she shares the auditory information. So it's like there is a proper place where we will be shared, this information too. So narration is, in film is all about holding back of information, determining when to reveal, what to reveal. So we think of a kind of, supra narrator who controls both the auditory and the visual narrator. That narrator seems to determine when we should hear what. So it's in the course of this interrogation that this auditory information is shared. And what is that auditory information? A ringtone from which she identifies the killer. So she's heard this ringtone before, and then the killer is someone in her vicinity. So it's externally focalized sound, that is the extra-diegetic music that overwhelms us over the sound which the character hears, and this is used in order to build suspense. The opposite happens in an unusual film. This is a slightly older film. Some of you may be familiar with this film called Kannada film called Beladingala Bale, where we hear a female voice throughout the film along with the male character. So this is an internally focalized auditive voice. We hear what the character hears. The character played by Anant Nag in the film called Raven. So he hears through the telephone a very sweet sounding voice, female voice throughout the film, but the corresponding visual is completely denied to us, and even in the end. So even at the time when it is supposed to be unraveled, this is completely, when visual and audio has to match. Even at that point in time, the external narrator does not oblige us, does not whet our curiosity. So it remains a sound which we hear, and it kind of kills the curiosity that we have, or retains the curiosity that we have about the girl who has that voice. Now, we'll talk briefly about voiceover narrators and focalizers. Just tell me how I am with time. Can I take another 5-6 minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah?
Yes, ma'am. You're good to go. Ma'am, I'm going to mute everybody. Just give me 1 minute for that, and
Yeah,
you can unmute yourself.
sure.
Ma'am, you can unmute yourself and then.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I continue?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So I'll take about 5 or 6 minutes more. So now we move on to voiceover narrators and focalizers. Yeah. Now, you again, you may be familiar with some of these contemporary films. If you remember the narrator who comes in Begum Jaan. So the film actually begins with a kind of what you could call as a kind of prequel, which comes before the credits, which is set in contemporary times, now, which kind of reminds us of a Nirbhaya kind of incident. And that incident reaches a particular kind of conclusion, and then the credits roll on the screen, including the title of the film and so on. And then comes a voiceover. You have the voiceover narrator telling us what happened in 1947. So we go back in time because the film that we are going to watch is actually set at the time of partition. So we go back in time in 1947 with Amitabh Bachchan's voiceover telling us how India and Pakistan were created and how entirely absurd and illogical the whole process of boundary drawing was. So here is an example of a narrator who comes as a kind of voiceover and tells us that this is the story of Begum Jan and we are going back in time. This is what happened in 1947. But he's not a focalizer in the sense that we don't hear, we don't watch or hear the film, through him. We don't watch the film through his eyes, nor do we hear what he hears. So here's an example of a narrator who's not necessarily a focalizer. So we often discuss in literature about a narration and point of view. So here is an example of a narrator, but the point of view, if you want to kind of, see a similarity between the term focalization and point of view. So he's not, certainly he's not a focalizer. We don't see what unfolds through his eyes. Again, there's a very interesting moment in the film Kahani. This I'm talking about Kahani 1, not Kahani 2. Kahani 1, which, as you know, is a kind of thriller narrative with Vidya Balan, playing a key role. So again, we see it's also a kind of revenge drama, and we see Vidya Balan kind of killing the antagonist in the end. Now, what I'm interested in is what happens after the mystery is, unraveled for us. At that point in time, so the unraveling of the mystery in the film kind of happens at the time of Durga Puja in Kolkata. And then the film, gives us a sense of the mystery having been resolved. But the film does not stop at that point in time. Because again, curiously, Amitabh Bachchan's voiceover comes in the end to tell us that every time the quantum of evil in this world increases, Durga Mata will come again and again. So I was talking to you about the retrospective process of meaning making with editing. Here is an instance of editing and addition of sound that comes right at the end of the film, which makes us rethink the whole film that we have watched so far. Not as a kind of, mystery, not as a kind of thriller mystery, but something that seems to have a kind of religious, connotation of whenever evil occurs, then Durga Ma comes in the form of, the slayer of evil. So we re-evaluate, so to speak, the entire movie retrospectively after the voice of the narrator. But that necessarily does not make the narrator, who comes in the end, the focalizer, someone through whose eyes we have watched the entire sequence of the film. But there are also very interesting examples of narrators who are focalizers. If you remember, and if you've also read the book Ice Candy Man by Bapsi Sidhwa, the entire narration there is through the hands of this little girl, 8 or 9-year-old girl, through whom we watch what happens to Aya and the entire tragedy of events that unfold at the time of partition. In the film, it's quite different. The film begins with an auditive narrator. So there is someone who is narrating the film, who seems to be a grown-up, but the visual on the screen is that 8-year-old girl. So what you see on screen is actually a kind of reminiscence of what she would have seen, because this narrator comes to us right at the end of the film. After there's a blackout, she comes to us, in Lahore with the statues in the backdrop. And then we realize that, oh, it's her voice, and we have seen the film through her eyes. So she's telling us what she has seen of the ayah and what happens at the time of partition. So here is an example of a narrator who is a focalizer in 1947 Earth. Similarly, if you watched Priyanka, this film called Sat Khoon Maaf, where Priyanka Chopra plays the role of the protagonist, you will see that the narration here is very, very interesting. Because as in Ruskin Bond's short story, which is probably a 6 or 8 page short story, which kind of gives you the all that happens to Susanna through the eyes of a young boy. Here we see the young boy is a grown-up who's recounting to his wife the very fascinating life of someone whom he has loved, desired from afar. So he kind of recapitulates all that happened to Susanna, and how she has murdered each successive husband through 5 or 6 different episodes. At some point, so in other words, he's a narrator, someone who's relating to his wife all that he knows about Susanna. So
Nikhila ma'am,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. We'll have a couple of minutes to wind up, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm on my last slide. So we see him focalizer, as he's the focalizer, but at some point he also does not know what has happened to Susanna, later in her life. So Susanna takes on the role of narrator and focalizer in the end. So it's kind of very layered in terms of narration and focalization. I have taken you through all these details because, as students of literature, we are all very comfortable wherever stories are told. And we often reduce, all our analysis to mere fabula, that is merely recounting the story. Or if it comes to the case of film, we demand that a film should be realistic, it should correspond to the world as we know it. But just some of these examples will show you what an artifice cinema is. That even the most popular films, create an architecture, a fairly complex architecture, a narrative structure from which the film's visual and audio is launched. So I'll stop at this point. If there are questions, I would be happy to take. Again, thank you all for being part of this. If there are questions, I would be happy to take.
We will take up one question, ma'am. We have one, probably a couple of minutes for this. Prashant Malur, sir, is asking, there are different narration styles. According to your analysis, what do you think is a very good way of narration?
Yeah, I'm only, someone who analyzes films. I don't make films. If I were making a film, then maybe I would have to make difficult choices, like what would be a good style of narration, what information I should release at what point in time, whether I should, use visuals predominantly, or should I bring in, hold back audio. So all these are difficult decisions for a filmmaker. For us, we analyze films that are made. We are interested in the analysis of films because we are interested in the process of meaning making. And meaning making is not something that happens in an obvious fashion. Meaning making is not something that has to do with simply story, recounting the story, because the story is relayed for us in very, very complex and layered ways in cinema. I'm sure, as students of literature, you will appreciate that interpretation of a narrative, a literary narrative, is very different from decisions regarding writing or creating literary narrative. So I think I wouldn't want to venture into territory which is not mine. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot. I now request Vaishali ma'am, chairperson of the Department of English, to thank the speaker and also to give us the closing comments. Over to you, ma'am.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Yeah. My profuse thanks to Dr. Nikhila for this illuminating lecture on narration in cinema. Given the paucity of time, with such remarkable, cogency and clarity, and with such telling illustrations, you have meticulously taken us through this journey. Also silent cinema, and then exploring all these myriad dimensions of cinema, adding to the complexity of, the critical appreciation of cinema, be it evocation of spaces, management of temporality in cinema, narration itself, even the use of something as minute as extra diegetic sound. You've drawn our attention to, I think, all these aspects which make, appreciation of cinema that much more complex, and look forward to another illuminating session with you soon. But my heartfelt thanks to you, because Nikhila accepted this invitation so graciously at such a short notice, and thank you all for being such an active, participant group, and I look forward to this kind of participation from all of you. Sorry, we could not take in questions because we have a webinar there that's hosted by the librarian in the afternoon, just in another hour's time. So by 2:30, 3 o'clock, which our Honorable Vice Chancellor will be addressing, and therefore we could not really do justice to the session, but you can always post your queries, and I'm deeply indebted to Dr. Nikhila for this illuminating lecture, which was truly inspiring, and which I think would definitely guide us. It would be like a map for us to, which would enrich us to appreciate cinema and explore the cinematic medium with more confidence. Thank you, Dr. Nikhila, and thank you, faculty members and students and members of other affiliated colleges. Thank you very much. And I also thank my student Babita for successfully handling this session despite my indisposition today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. And please do join us tomorrow for D. Ravi Narayan's session on, research possibilities in English language studies. Thank you very much for joining us today. I will pick up the questions that I have not answered, and I will definitely, pick it up with ma'am, and I'll get back to you. Thank you very much. Ma'am, I'm ending the session for all of you.